I really love doing research. It's something that has just fascinated me for a very long time. And I'm not sure what it is specifically about doing research. I know there are parts of the research process that I absolutely love. There are parts of the research process that I don't necessarily love because I find it very difficult, but it's things that I know are really important to the research process. So I try to give it my time and my energy, due diligence, you'll say. So it's possibly to do with the problem-solving aspects of research. So what I love about research is asking those kinds of questions that go along with a research paper or a research study, putting those hypotheses out there and testing those hypotheses. These are things that I really enjoy. And then seeing that data collected, working through the analysis, and as that analysis kind of showcases some clear or clear-ish results, then it becomes a very exciting venture because you start to see something that wasn't there before. It starts to shine the light on a new discovery that you may not have realized was really critical or important for the question that you were asking until after you collected the data and done the analysis, and now you see, wow, that's a really critical component to what I'm trying to answer. And then, of course, having some sort of answer is always really nice to achieve whenever you do a research project or whenever you're conducting research. It's not always possible to get a clear answer. A lot of the times the answers are ambiguous, or at best they'll raise a whole lot of new questions. And for me, that's even a very exciting part of research, is actually being able to say at the end of the day, this is what now we kind of know, or we think maybe the issues at stake, and here are 10,000 new questions that we have to then look at further. So I think that part of research is really fun for me. It really gets me excited, and then seeing how ideas connect between different lines and different areas of the literature is also something I really enjoy. Building off of those different lines of the literature, very I don't know, I just geek out at those things. When I realized I loved research, I was actually studying music at the time, and I thought that I wanted to be a musician. I thought that I wanted to perform music. And I was studying at a small liberal arts college outside of Washington, D.C., and I enrolled in the music program there. And I think originally I was studying music teaching, like how to teach music pedagogy. And it was a lot of fun. I remember the first day I went to the university, like just to check it out. I met with one of the professors there. It was one of the music pedagogy professors. And we just sat, and it was an older guy, and we just sat and chit-chatted. And, it felt right for me to be there at that time. And so I applied, I was accepted, I enrolled, I did the audition process and everything like that. And that was what I wanted to do. I was like, I want to be on stage, I want to be in performances, and I got to do a lot of that in the process. But during that journey, I took a class in music history, and my professor in music history class was an amazing woman, and I, to this day, owe her a huge debt of gratitude because she inspired a love for critical inquiry, a love for learning about very specific areas of knowledge. And, it was a music history class, so I was just there to learn music history, and she kind of gave us a really broad challenge in one of our assignments: pick a topic to do a research paper on, and do the research, write the paper, submit it, and I'll grade it. That'll be your assignment for the semester. That's your big assignment. Now, I've had a lot of papers like that before. This was not even my first undergraduate degree that I was completing. I had written plenty of research papers prior to that class. For whatever reason, I got stuck in my head this idea that we could kind of question where music as a profession began. That was my research question that kind of guided my inquiry. And looking back, I mean, it's not a great research question, but it's still an interesting enough research question for an undergraduate student to kind of throw themselves into. And I did exactly that. So I had that as my guiding light. What are the origins of music as a profession? And then I start digging into all that has been written about those issues and going back into history and even prehistory, what we might know about prehistoric musics. And it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, but I found that the knowledge there was rather scarce. There was a lot about the ancient Greeks. There was a lot about what is in recorded history, but none of it alluded to the professionalism of it. And it all kind of came back to different areas of religion and expression and things like that. So the extent of my investigation kind of began to stop there because I was running into this wall of, okay, now I don't know. There's nothing I can find out about this. And so I kind of just slowed down a little bit and I rethought my research question. I said, what else could I investigate that's kind of related to this topic? And in the course of my reading and inquiry about the history of music as a profession, I came across this archaeological site in what is modern day Iraq, a place called Tepe Gawra. And I'm probably mispronouncing that, but I'm doing my best here. So Tepe Gawra, just big old mound, and they kind of went through all the stratigraphy, all the layers of that mound, and unearthed archaeological objects dating back to prehistory. And one of the things they unearthed in that whole process was these bone flutes that were made out of goats' knuckle bones. And I've mentioned this before in the podcast, but I want to kind of go back to this because this was what inspired me to be a researcher, to kind of pursue academia. So I found out about these bone flutes that were used, and it was just a reference. All I saw was a reference in like a music history encyclopedia listed under this ancient musics. I think it was ancient musics of Persia or Iraq. And I was reading about it, and there was this one little tiny 3-sentence paragraph. There was this archaeological expedition in Tepe Gawra. Unearthed in that expedition were these bone flutes. And so I was like, okay, that sounds awesome. Let me check that out for a little while. So I dug into that. I tried to dig up everything I could find about that excavation. So now I'm outside of the music and music professionalism areas, and I'm into more archaeology. And so I'm digging into those original source literature that documented the excavations, which had been conducted over a course of several years and were published in these huge monographs that listed all the items that they found, how they found them, how they were unearthed, and everything like that. So that was a complete joy for me. I mean, I geeked out so hard in this project. And so I'm coming to the end of the semester and I'm realizing that I've just scratched the surface of the topic that I really want to investigate. There's no way that I'm going to be able to put in a paper that's going to do justice to the kind of work that I put into this inquiry. And so I met with my teacher and I said, look, please, 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 can I submit this paper late? Can I submit it next semester? Because we had 2 classes that were kind of connected to each other. It was like Music History 1 and then Music History 2. And I said, can I please, please, please submit this late? She said, sure, no problem. We're going to give you an incomplete for this semester so you don't get a grade. Next semester, when you submit your final assignment, I'll give you the grade for that, whatever you get on that. I said, fantastic, I'm in, no problem. So I managed to keep my motivation up. I managed to continue to pursue this investigation, and then the next stage was actually getting to analyze, to kind of inspect those archaeological objects that were found at that site. So these were these bone flutes that happened to be at the University of Pennsylvania, which was a couple of hours from where I was living. So steam on down to University of Pennsylvania, stay with my aunt, and get to see these bone flutes in my hands. Absolutely amazing. They gave me gloves and everything like that, so I wasn't damaging anything. Got to take 1,000 pictures of these bone flutes. I still have all the pictures. It was absolutely just a blast. And then I got to write the report and I got to speculate about the different parts of the flute. And I talked to some of the researchers that were at the University of Pennsylvania, and they told me a little bit about the types of bone that they came from and a little bit about how the bone looked and then how that kind of worked in the animal, and then what were the human kind of modifications they made to that bone in order to make it into a musical instrument. Okay, so long story short, it was an absolutely amazing and inspiring experience, and I did fine on my paper, and I eventually gave that paper to the University of Pennsylvania, so they have it on file there at the museum as one of the reports that have kind of investigated and analyzed these bone flutes. That was the starting point for me. That was the opportunity to independently, on my own terms, investigate a topic, find my way through those different areas of the literature, find my way through the different topics that are part of this broader issue in order to identify that specific topic that I really wanted to understand more about, and to establish a sort of framework for my investigation, and then to actually go and collect primary data and investigate the primary sources that were associated with that topic. And that was a complete and utter joy for me. Later on, I got a lot of opportunities to do more research and to collect primary data. And I think collecting primary data is one of the things that I love most about research. Doing interviews, conducting surveys, all of these things kind of reveal to me more about the process and about our knowledge about an issue than just doing a literature review or even writing up the analysis after the fact. I really, really enjoy the data collection and analysis components. And so when I was working at a university in Philadelphia for a little while, and I was doing desk research for a few different projects. I managed to get to participate in a large-scale research study on cancer health disparities, and that was my first chance to actually connect with a broader network of researchers and to work in a larger scale research project, which is very, 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 very different than working on an individual smaller scale project. And this is one of these kind of weird things about academia, is when you're doing your PhD, often you're embedded in a larger scale project, but you're still crafting and doing a smaller individual project within that. When you finish your PhD and you go to work as an academic, you go right back into this world of connected, larger scale research projects. So I always found it a little bit funny that in our PhD, the training we have as researchers to go into an academic profession, we're expected to be able to do research on our own. But then when we actually go into a research as a profession, we're expected to do research in coordination with 10, 15, 20 researchers around the world. I don't know. That's just the way it is, I suppose. But I think it would be great if we reformed some of our PhD study programs and made them a little bit less individualistic and a little bit more connected and research project based that go over multi-sites. When I was at University of Philadelphia, I got a chance to participate in this large-scale research project, and it really taught me how to make those network connections and how to work with people from a diversity of backgrounds, because even though we were focused on cancer health disparities, we also were working with people from the law profession and public health and medicine and oncology and a whole bunch of different areas of research. And so it was a chance to understand, what does that mean to work in a large-scale study, to connect with other people who are from different backgrounds, and to coordinate an effort that has a single or a small set of objectives. And I think that was really, really valuable for my work today. Now I get to do research every day of my life, and it's an incredible joy for me to be able to practice knowledge creation as my profession. It's something that I really enjoy and I love doing every day. Designing my own research studies is something I really love. Getting to execute those studies, implement those studies in cooperation with researchers around the world is something that I really find a lot of joy in. But recently, I've become kind of bored with this sort of work. I'm still excited by critical inquiry, but the industry behind conducting research has me a little bit bored with the process. There's a lot of inquiry for the sole sake of just inquiring, and there's a lot of work that's just focused solely on extracting money from grant funders. And so this to me is, it's caused me to lose a lot of the love that I found in the research field. I am still a very curious person, and I will always have kind of a research scientist mentality to my work. I will always love collecting data, analyzing that data, getting new insights. I always love connecting new ideas across different areas. But I think that I am ready for a change. I think that I'm ready to find a new area of practice and something that can fulfill me for the next stage of my career. Takeaway is this: science is an amazing field. It really helps you uncover, it's helped me uncover a lot of latent desires in my professional life, a lot of things that kind of were below the surface that I wanted to do, and research gave me the chance to do those things. But you don't have to be an academic to be a researcher. Or a scientist. You don't have to work in a research institute or a university to create knowledge. There are many, many opportunities in many different professions to be a knowledge creator and to utilize that knowledge in an impactful way. So my call to action is this. Let's work on finding a way of applying science to our everyday lives. So how can you use science in your everyday life? What sort of questions do you have that you can answer with data?